Let's move on to another off the top here, shall we? And that off the top is this. In the aforementioned Avengers Endgame, there were a lot of pop moments. You know, a moment that happens on screen where the audience just explodes. Big pop, big pop, big pop. One of the biggest pops, every time I went into the theater to watch this movie, was what became known as the A-Force scene. When on the battlefield at the end of Avengers, you had all the female characters. Made no logistical sense that actually happened, that they all happened to be in the same spot. But then again, there's a number of big pops in Endgame that made no logistical sense, and that's fine. But when all the female characters got together and did their big rush, every time I was in the theater, there was a big explosion, a big pop. Now, there has been some talk and conversations going on about the possibility of an all-female Avengers-style team-up movie. Kevin Feige talked about it a while ago as something that they were looking at and being possible. Well, according to one of the stars of the MCU, Letitia Wright, who plays Shuri in Black Panther, according to her, it's not a possibility, it's happening. Like, to her, this thing is absolutely happening. She was being interviewed about it and talked about it. And when asked about the idea of bringing together like an all-female group, she says this: "I don't think we have to fight for it," Letitia Wright says. Victoria Alonso, Marvel Studios Executive Vice President of Production, is very strong about spearheading this thing alongside Kevin Feige, Marvel Studio President. It is only a matter of time before they do it. So to Letitia Wright, who, by the way, she's 26 years old. She's not the 16-year-old they make her out to be in Black Panther. She's probably male or female. I don't know if there was a more stunning human being, male or female, in all of the MCU than Letitia Wright. But to Letitia Wright, this concept of like an all-female Avengers movie is no longer just a possibility. To her, she's saying, oh no, it's happening. Like, we've got the executive vice president, we've got the president, this is happening. The only question now is, it's a matter of time. And I don't doubt it for a second, and I believe it. Listen, Kevin Feige is a guy who notoriously does not move quickly on things. He's very patient and takes his time. How many years before they announced a Black Widow movie that Kevin Feige said, yeah, I'm looking at doing a Black Widow movie? Years. When they got the rights to the Fox properties in X-Men and Fantastic Four, a lot of people thought, well, they're going to go into production next month. They're going to make a X-Men in the MCU. No. Kevin Feige's like, look, I got 5 years planned right now. And he takes his time and he's methodical. And so it doesn't actually surprise me to hear Letitia Wright come out in this point and say, oh, no, it's happening. Right now, it's just a matter of when. That's all that's left. The only question left on the table right now, Rob, is when. So it's going to happen. I completely believe at this point now it's going to happen. Letitia Wright seems to think so. I think it's going to happen. The question there are two questions that now come up, Rob, and I'll put these to you. Number one, how long do you think we're going to need to wait for this? And is it even a good idea? I mean, is it a good idea to pull a film like this together right now? What's your take on this?
Well, one, I think it's the way that you can do an event. If you needed to, you could do an Avengers movie now with the all-girl team because they've been introduced already. You know, people know them. You know, they're not dealing with the repercussions of losing two of their key members. And it gives you a whole new dynamic. And if you wanted to do sort of an Ocean's 8 version of an all-female Avengers team, I think that could be great. I think that could be great. The only thing that I would worry about is there's got to be, one, a reason to get them all together that I think is credible, which I'm sure they could figure out. And two, the ramifications. I mean, we're coming off of Avengers movies, Infinity War and Endgame. Yeah, they don't get much bigger than that. So it would be interesting to see what they're going to come up with that can be universe shaking enough that people would be as engaged as they were from these other films. But I like the idea. I think the idea is really cool. I don't understand. I mean, look, you know, everyone talks about, whether this is woke or Me Too or whatever. No, I like, it's happened in comic books before. I like the idea of getting all these characters together and going to kicking ass somewhere. I'm in. I'll watch that.
You know what's interesting to me is that there's a novelty to this idea, and some people think novelty is a bad word. Novelty can be really great and really effective. You just got to be very careful not to overplay the novelty of something. Like once the novelty of something wears off, right?
I agree. I mean, it again, for me, it's all about great characters and a great story. As long as you have that, if you lead with the fact that we're going to make an all-female Avengers film, okay, well, that's your premise. You never lead with that. You got to come up with great characters and a great story. They've got the characters. So now they have to have a good story. And once you have those two things, then you can market the film by saying it's the first all-female Avengers team up. But you got to give me a good story first and foremost. And look, I don't doubt that they already have one. I think
I don't doubt it either. I don't doubt it. Nope. But here's the interesting thing. Again, the novelty of it, you cannot deny the pop. And again, to me, it was really surprising. But when that A-Force scene happens in Endgame, the pop in that theater, not as big as Mjolnir flying through the air and landing in Captain America's hands, right, which is something we had been waiting years to see. But it was a major, major pop, and the novelty, that is cool. What I've already seen online, some people though, and this is what bothers me. Some people online like, oh, there's the novelty of blah, blah. Listen, when people start talking about, when these rumors start going around is, hey, you know what? The new Spider-Man, it's going to have Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire too. Don't freak out and start pissing your pants, because take us what? That's a novelty. That's right. Totally a novelty, and that's not a bad thing. But the hypocrisy of, getting all excited about this idea of like bringing in Andrew, but then going, oh, that's just a novelty. That's just a shtick, bringing all the female things. It's like, pick a side. Like, you don't get to have one and not the other. Like, if one's okay, then the other's okay. But I agree with you, Rob.
I mean,
don't pull the trigger on it unless you got a foundational idea.
Yeah, like the novelty is great. I mean, that's the trigger that gets people into the theater or whatever, that gets people interested. But if you've got a killer story, the reason, and what's fun is when you have ensemble movies like this it's the character interplay and the character banter. And look at all look at all the actresses that they have playing these roles. I'd love to see them all team up to go on a woman on a mission movie. Whether it's the Dirty Dozen or whether it's the Guns of Navarone in space, or whatever. I mean, bring it on. It could be great.
Yeah, I think this is, listen, again, I admit and I confess, to me, this is the instant appeal to this is the novelty of it. I mean, that's the instant appeal for me, is the novelty of it. But it's really no different than finding out that we were getting a Thor movie where Hulk was going to be second chair in it, where it was going to be basically a Thor and Hulk movie going around. It's like, okay, all right, that sounds kind of cool. The idea of doing this sort of thing that's never really been done before in the new age of comic book movies with DC or Marvel would kind of be the first time. I think there's an interesting novelty of it. And listen, it would be different, Rob, if the MCU didn't have a good collection of really great female characters, but they do.
Yeah.
From Shuri and Valkyrie and I don't know what's going to happen with Black Widow, whether she could or could not be, Nebula, Scarlet Witch, Okoye. I mean, they have a
Mantis.
Really great Mantis. They have a really great Captain Marvel. They have a really great collection of female characters. If it was just like they had a bunch of C-level characters and nobody really liked, but that would be questionable, but I think they've got the lineup here. I think they have a strong enough lineup that they could pull something like this up. It could be total crap. Absolutely it could be. But I think they definitely have a force of personalities in this lineup that it could be. And by the way, didn't even mention Pepper.
Right.
I fell in love with the Pepper character at the end of Endgame. I can't remember what the code name of that was when she's wearing that armor, but I thought that was great too. Rob, how would you evaluate the strength of the lineup? Because I think you've got the characters here to do it. What do you think?
I do too. You got to have I know she's not a superhero, but you got to have a Okoye in there just because I love her so much, and I really want an Okoye Hot Toys figure. But I think that these characters are all great, and they're different enough that their interplay off one another could be awesome. And Pepper in the armor, she's got her own Iron Man armor, and maybe she's been training with it because she realized that Tony was right. Tony Stark wanted to build a suit of armor around the world, and if the Avengers didn't exist, if Tony didn't exist, the world would have been lost. They wouldn't have taken it back from what Thanos did. So maybe I loved the idea of Pepper in her armor. By the way, they're making that hot toy figure. Come on, what's up?
I would love, you know what I would love? A hot toy duo set with Tony and Pepper back to back in that, because I had said that was the other one of the big pop moments in Endgame is when it's just a very quick shot of Tony and Pepper both in the air fighting off, and they end up in that one shot where they're back to back and the camera spins around. It's like, oh, that was such a great shot. Well, when you get
that Pepper figure, I already have the Iron Man armor, so when you get the Pepper figure, I can recreate that on
just make it happen. Just make it happen. All right, guys, the question is, what do you think about this? Do you think Letitia's right? Do you think it is now a foregone conclusion? This movie is going to happen at some point. Maybe you still have some doubts about that. What do you think about the idea for it in general? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, guys.